The Federal Reserve Bank, the enslavement of the United States of America, financial slaves to a sinister system, the hidden beasts they don't want you to know about or understand. I'm sure you've heard it said that knowledge is power. Knowledge is power. Knowledge is enlightenment, illuminating one from misconceptions that blind people to consider and conclude and resolve things they give thought and consideration to, from seeing and understanding things in their proper perspective. True knowledge gives a person a proper perspective and an enlightenment and understanding of the subject that it deals with. And it enlightens us from misconceptions. And that is what I hope to deliver every person who views this video from any misconception they may have had about the Federal Reserve Bank. Now, there has always been fields of knowledge in every generation upon earth that probably would be wise to be kept from the general public at large for their own welfare and safety. For instance, knowing how to make an atomic bomb is knowledge that the general public at large does not need to know, because we are living in an imperfect world wherein the majority of mankind are very confused and blinded to what real truth is, and wherein infidel ideologies exist that self-justify those that are blinded therein to kill their fellow man, all in the name of God and under the banner of their religion. True knowledge is something we all have to labor to come by. Some fields of knowledge can only be reached and understood and attained to by way and means of incremental prerequisite knowledge. In the field of math, one need not seek to understand calculus until one first has learned algebra and trigonometry first. In this video, I hope to piece together knowledge that I have researched to gather and format it all in a very simple way to use as a vehicle to convey into the viewer a good understanding of our present-day money system, and by doing so reveal to the viewer something that most Americans never knew and are not aware of, and that the 12 privately owned and operated banks that make up the Federal Reserve banking system don't want you to know about. Everything that you're going to see in this video, which will probably, this whole presentation will probably come about in 2 videos instead of 1. And I hope to have a book published in days to come. Hopefully this week it'll be finished, on the Federal Reserve System, and that which you're going to be seeing in this presentation here, mostly every bit of it will, just about every bit of it anyway, will probably be in that book. So email me later on. Give me about a week after you see these videos, and if you're interested in the book on everything that I'm presenting to you here, just holler at me and I'll let you know more about it then. But you know, those from generation to generation who have become infamous because of the vile villainy of crimes they have committed against their fellow man, and have for a time gotten away with such, don't ever want those that they have harmed to actually ever know what they did to cause all the hurt, misery, and pain, and especially to know how they did what they did and got away with such. Because once their victims find out who the culprits are and what they did to their fellow man that brought such devastation and pain and misery into their lives, then the culprits know that their days are numbered from that moment on, and they wait in fearful anticipation for the spiteful reprise that their victims are going to one day inflict back upon them to pay them back for the treachery committed by the culprits. Now, there are some wisely kept secrets in life for the good of mankind at large. Knowledge that can only be channeled for the good of mankind, as long as it is used by those that can only be it can only be used for good to their fellow man. But what you are getting ready to have revealed to you in this video is something that the general public at large really needs to know. And what you are getting ready to learn about our present-day money system is going to make the viewer really mad. It is going to astound the viewer and almost be too hard to believe that such exists and is in place, and that nothing is being done about it to correct the matter. But the beast is being left untouched and left alone and being allowed to continue unfettered and unrestricted, and remain continually free to destroy the lives and hopes and dreams of all hard-working Americans, and banefully bondage the lives and hopes and dreams of all hardworking Americans, more deeper into an endless despair, and wreck their future and chain them from the freedom and peace and prosperity that they seek by lawful means for their families. Can the Federal Reserve Bank and its system of fiendish financial operations actually be that bad and channeled against the welfare of the citizens of the United States of America? Well, before we get into the deep details of explaining and revealing the beast for what it is and how it operates by the moment to your destruction as a people and to our nation, let's consider some of the following. Henry Ford, a wise, shrewd, industrial, innovative thinker and engineer that has played one of the most important roles in the world's history, especially in our generation today, in mobilizing the world to accelerate itself into the luxury and convenience of travel as we know it today, took a good look at the money system in America. And let's hear what he had to say about it in his time. I quote, "It is well enough that people of the nation do not understand our banking and monetary system. For if they did, I believe there would be a revolution before tomorrow morning." Some may ask the question even more so now after hearing that. My goodness, what's the big deal with the Federal Reserve Bank? Is it actually that evil? Well, let's look at what some others have said, or hear what some others have said. Congressman Louis T. McFadden stated the Federal Reserve Banks are one of the most corrupt institutions the world has ever seen. There is not a man within the sound of my voice who does not know that the nation is run by the international bankers. End of quote. Let's look at hear what Robert H. Hemphill, the credit manager of the Federal Reserve Bank of Atlanta, Georgia. He stated thus. He stated, "This is a staggering thought. We are completely dependent on the commercial banks. Someone has to borrow every dollar we have in circulation, cash or credit. If the banks create ample synthetic money, we are prosperous. And if not, we starve. We are absolutely without a permanent money system. When one gets a complete grasp of the picture, the tragic absurdity of our hopeless position is almost incredible. But there it is. It is the most important subject intelligent persons can investigate and reflect upon. It is so important that our present civilization may collapse unless it becomes widely understood and the defects remedied very soon." Now, sir, that was the end of that quote. Sir Josiah Stamp, president of the Bank of England in the 1920s, the second highest, richest man in Britain, stated thus, "Banking was conceived in iniquity and was born in sin. The bankers own the earth. Take it away from them, but leave them the power to create deposits, and with the flick of the pen they will create enough deposits to buy it back again. However, take it away from them, and all the great fortunes like mine will disappear. And they ought to disappear, for this would be a happier and better world to live in. But if you wish to remain the slaves of bankers and pay the cost of your own slavery, let them continue to create deposits." Thomas Jefferson, in a letter to Eldridge Gary on January 26, 1779, he stated thus, "Banking establishments are more dangerous than standing armies." And President Woodrow Wilson stated, "A great industrial nation is controlled by its system of credit. Our system of credit is concentrated. The growth of the nation and all of our activities are in the hands of a few men. We have come to one of the worst ruled, longer a government, one of the most completely controlled and dominated governments in the world. No longer a government of free opinion, no longer a government by conviction and vote of the majority, but a government by the opinion and duress of small groups of dominant men." Just before he died, Wilson is reported to have stated to friends that he had been deceived and that, quote, "I have betrayed my country." He referred to the Federal Reserve Act passed during his presidency. President James A. Garfield stated thus, "Whoever controls the volume of money in any country is absolute master of all industry and commerce." Well, what I've given you is some strong quotes from, at one time of their life, some very important people. And I would think that this has brought the viewer to an elevated height of just being astounded already as to what some of these men have been on record of saying is, my goodness, how can a banking system be so wicked and evil? Well, if you'll just bear with me through this video, I'm going to give you more. And as we see it unfold, hopefully we will understand that the Federal Reserve System, like Henry T. Ford had said in more or less words, he said if the people really understood it, it's best that they don't understand it, he said. Because if they did, they'd be out in the streets tomorrow. It'd be a mass riot. That's how bad it is. It's almost like you can't give some people the knowledge of the atomic bomb. They would take it and blow up everything. Well, the same way with this has been kept such a secret for many years. The Federal Reserve System and all that makes it up, they don't want you, the American people, to understand how it works. Because they're afraid of just that very type of incitement of malice, an incitement of riot that it might cause against the institution as it stands against us, the American people today. Now, money is not the root of all evil, but the love of money is the root of all evil. Let's see for a moment what the Bible says about money. In Exodus 22nd chapter, verse 25, if you lend money to any of my people that is poor by thee, thou shalt not be to him as an usurer, neither shalt thou lay upon him usury. In Leviticus, the 25th chapter, verses 36 and 37, take no usury of him, or increase. Thou shalt not give thy money upon usury. In Deuteronomy, the 23rd chapter, verse 20, unto thy brother thou shalt not lend upon usury, that the Lord thy God may bless thee. Now, the word usury there refers to interest. It's like I'm not supposed to lend you $5 and ask for $10 back. And you know, I'm sure the Lord will rebuke any Christian that is looking at this and that after looking at this video and hearing those scriptures, in case they never knew it before, goes out here and lends a Christian brother $5 and wants 10 back. God says, don't do that to your brethren. Now, in the year of 2011, the national debt, that is the money that our government has borrowed from the international bankers, the Federal Reserve Bank, made up of 12 privately owned banks that are not government extensions or agencies of our government in any capacity, comes to the amount of $14,697,414,789,563.40. And the amount in interest that our government will pay these private-owned banks, that their owners will stick in their pockets, will come to, now this is just the interest, $412,517,504,466.06 for the year of 2011. And that is just the interest. To think that amount of money is coming from taxes they take out of the paychecks of Americans and given to bankers that can print money by the billions for about $1,000 just to pay for paper and ink. And this is money that is not backed by silver and gold. Now, when you or I need to borrow money, unless we have a friend that will lend us such without having to pay such money back with interest, we probably have to go to a bank or a lending institution, and if we have good credit and borrow the money, but we have to pay it back with interest. Now, when our government has to finance a war or come up with money to repair damages to any of our national infrastructures after earthquakes or storms, our government has to borrow from its banker, the Federal Reserve Bank. And that bank lends that money to the government and demands that it be paid back with interest. So I'm sure some of you are probably considering, why should our government borrow money from any bank? Why don't our government print their own money and pay off debts and finance the government without using tax money and without having to pay back debts to bankers that print their own money and lend it to us, demanding interest being paid back above the debt itself incurred by the loan? Why does our government keep indebting us to bankers that demand interest? Why doesn't our government default on the loans, since these bankers over the years have swindled us, the taxpayers, out of so much money by way and means of their usury, and print their own money and pay off all debts, including the national debt, and then print out $10,000 for every American in the world and put such in safekeeping for minors in government banks, not privately owned banks by foreigners, and start all over, making this whole nation prosperous and giving everyone here in this nation a new start financially. Instead, our government gave billions of our tax dollars to banks last year, owned and operated by foreigners, and told the American people that by giving such money to the banks, it would be giving them money to lend to us to boost the economy. How insane can one person and or one government be? Within 3 months after the bottom dropped out, everyone was in default on their car and house payments, which gave everyone a marred credit rating. And what bank is going to lend money to anyone with bad credit? Now, let me try to tell you why our government. Let me try to answer that question. Why did our government leaders give billions of your tax money to billionaire bankers instead of taking that money and giving everybody a stimulus maybe of $10,000? Every street person, every minor that's in the United States, put it in a government account for them to where when they become 18 years old and graduate from school, if they do, and that would have been an incentive if that would have been put in there, that if they graduate from school, that would have been an incentive for some of them to graduate from school, and they would have had some money to start college with. Why didn't our government give those that, when the bottom dropped out, a stimulus package there that they could have just had money to keep with their car payments, their house payments, and that would have gave them a 3-month grace period to look for work? Instead of giving that money, your tax money, to billionaire bankers. Well, I haven't asked you a question that you probably haven't asked yourself, and most of you, or a good many of you, probably already know the answer, but I'm going to give it to you in dollars and cents. Goldman Sachs is an investing bank, an investing banking firm, and they contributed the following amounts of money to the following politicians. And by the way, the names of these politicians and the amount that they gave these politicians is the reason why these very politicians I'm about to name came to the bat and tried to persuade all the rest of the congressmen and senators to go ahead and give all this money to the bankers who financed their election and were so good to them, than to give it to us, the taxpayers, who support these people and give them the life of a fat cat there in Washington, a life of comfort and ease, a life of medical insurance where they're fully covered medically. Why didn't we get the break? Wasn't that foolish? Oh, we're going to give it to the bankers and then they're going to lend you some money. They're not lending the money to anybody. After everybody defaulted, within 3 months, everybody being in default, you go try to go to the bank and say, well, I've defaulted on my house and I've defaulted on the car. But the government said, since they gave y'all all these billions, y'all are going to lend some back to us. Yeah, right. Okay, well, Goldman and Sachs, here's how they court Washington politicians. And this is why, when they want money, the taxpayers' money, this is how they get it. First of all, Harry Reid, they gave him $6,000, talking about Goldman Sachs, but wait a minute. You might say that's not much, but wait a minute. They turned around again and gave him $99,200. Somebody put that kind of money in your pocket. Aren't you going to come to bat for him? If they did it once, you're probably thinking, wait a minute. When it comes to re-election next time, if I go to the bat for him this time, they're going to give me that and even more. Mitch McConnell, he got $17,500, but wait a minute. They turned around and gave him $163,000 more. Senator Chris Dodd, they gave him $105,400. Then they turned around and gave him $527,444. Senator Joe Biden, they gave him $14,800. But then they turned around and gave him another $143,650. President Obama, they gave him $691,930. But wait a minute, they turned around and gave him $2,102,643. Senator McCain, who came to bat for him. Let's give these bankers, these billionaire bankers, some money. Oh yeah, they gave him $208,395. But wait a minute, they turned back around again and gave him $1,890,574. Now, folks, I'm telling you, if you haven't figured it out already, now this is one video that Washington does not want you to see. They don't want you to hear these figures. The bought and paid for individuals named gave great voice to persuade the Senate and Congress to give these international bankers a $700 billion bailout. By the way, get this, the former CEO of Goldman Sachs was Hank Paulson, now head of the Treasury Department, and it was his joy to hand over to his former employer, Goldman Sachs, all that money. Now, Goldman Sachs took all that tax money and made $3 billion in 3 months' time, a 153% profit, and bought up millions upon millions of losses by the poor people of their homes and businesses. AIG was given $13 billion, and they owed Goldman Sachs $12.9 billion, and was now able to pay their bill to Goldman Sachs, which is the most profitable firm in Wall Street history. And guess what? With all the money and profits that they made from your tax money that our bought and paid for politicians gave these already billionaires, they don't have to pay any of this money back. You go borrow money and see if you have to pay it back. And see how you will be dogged by creditors and traced down and your wages garnished. They don't have to pay any of this money back. Why didn't our godless government give the bailout to the poor taxpayers that give them their comfortable lifestyle on Capitol Hill with their tax money and help them keep their homes and vehicles instead of giving that tax money to billionaire bankers? Well, the answer is in the figures just given to you. When you have a banking institution financing your reelection with such large contributions as you have just heard, whose aid are you going to come to in time of crisis? The poor burdened taxpayer or the rich fat cat on Wall Street who makes your life comfortable and easy with all the gifts of monies during reelection time? Also get this. Now hold on to your hat. Lloyd Blankfein, CEO of Goldman Sachs, has a yearly salary given to him in the amount of $68 million. How would you like to make that kind of money a year? $68 million a year. And your tax money was given to rich people like this instead of giving it back to you so that you could have kept your homes and vehicles. Goldman Sachs earned $325 million for their financial advice. $10 billion went to TARP, $11 billion went to the Federal Reserve, $30 billion went to the FDIC. As mentioned already, $13 billion went to AIG. Now back to the Federal Reserve Bank. Now, by the way, if you're not incensed by now, you must come to the conclusion, and I would have to also, that you have to be a person that is just, well, I would think that you might have taken a little bit of a heavy dose of Valium and Xanax today if none of this moves you so far, and you really haven't heard hardly nothing yet. Back to the Federal Reserve Bank. 12 privately owned and operated banks make up the Federal Reserve Bank. That has nothing to do with the federal government of the United States. They pay no income tax. Oh, you, the poor person, has to. But these billionaire bankers don't. Foreigners, almost entirely Jewish. And I don't say that in a way of disrespect. I love Jewish people. I promise you, if there's any person that loves Jewish people, I love Jewish people. But I love people of all nationalities and all colors. And I don't hold it against you for your religious beliefs if they differ from mine. I don't. Now, I know that some of you would be incensed against me because I don't agree with your religious beliefs. But by the grace of God only, I'm at peace with everyone. I have no axe to grind, but foreigners, almost entirely Jewish, control the money supply of the United States. Now, they pay no income tax. In 1933, President Woodrow Wilson gave an executive order to turn over all of our gold and gold certificates over to these bankers. It's like it wasn't enough that they have control over all the money supply. Let's give them all the gold, too. We haven't given them enough yet. Let's give them all the gold. Now let's look and see who all these bankers are that make up the Federal Reserve Bank. The Rothschilds of London and Berlin. The Lazard brothers of Paris. Israel Moses Seif of Italy. Kuhn Loeb and Company of Germany and New York. Warburg and Company of Hamburg, Germany. Lehman Brothers of New York. Goldman Sachs of New York. Rockefeller Brothers of New York. All the primary owners are European branch establishments. Now, why haven't we had a president? In the light of all this knowledge, which to some aren't new, I mean, there have been presidents from generation to generation that have known about the Federal Reserve Bank and know what's behind it, what it's about, how it's composed, how it's run. Why haven't some of our past presidents or even present tried to get rid of the Federal Reserve Bank? Why don't, when they take office, saying, well, from this moment on, we're going to coin our own money, and we're going to default on our debt to the Federal Reserve Bank. They have robbed us through usury, so we're simply not going to pay them. And if Congress and Senate didn't back that resolve up, the president could say, well, we'll pay them. We'll just print up our own money in coins. We will pay off the Federal Reserve Bank. We will pay off all our debts. And from this moment forth, we will never borrow from any banker ever again. And also, we will get rid of all private banks in the United States of America. And we will have all of our money will be in coin. We will coin our own money. We will never have to borrow from banks again. We will not even have to raise taxes. If we need money, we will print our own money. We will put it out there when we need money, and that will increase the money flow and give more money out there to where our Americans can attempt to earn it through proper labor and lawful means of employment. Well, non-presidents, actually 9, have actually tried to get rid of the Federal Reserve. They actually had. We have 9 presidents that had tried to get rid of it because they seen it for what it was. And a number of them were killed. And the ones who made it through alive, they were assassinated. And some of them they were attempts to assassinate them. And some of them more than once. Now, Andrew Jackson in 1835 is one. Abraham Lincoln in 1865, James Garfield in 1881, William McKinley in 1900, Harry Truman in 1950, John Kennedy in 1963, Richard Nixon in 1974, Gerald Ford in 1975, Ronald Reagan in 1981. These were people that tried to get rid of the Federal Reserve Bank. And some of them were killed, and some of them lived through the attempt assassination upon their life. Now let's see if we can look into this whole sinister system of the Federal Reserve Bank and see if we can, in a simple way, without clouding the issue, and see and understand how this banking system of private bankers came in and took over our money system. Now, history reveals nations can be conquered by the use of one or more 3 methods. The most common is conquest by war. In time, though, this method usually fails because the captors hate the captors and rise up and drive them out if they can. Now, much force is needed to maintain control, making it expensive for the conquering nation. Now, a second method is by religion, where men are convinced they must give their captives part of their earning as obedience to God. And such a captivity is vulnerable to philosophical exposure or by overthrow by armed force, since religion by its nature lacks military force to regain control once its captives become disillusioned. Now, the third method can be called economic conquest. It takes place when nations are placed under tribute without the use of visible force, that is, or coercion, so that the victims do not realize they have been conquered. Tribute is collected from them in the form of legal debts and taxes, and they believe they are paying it for their own good, and for the good of others, are to protect from some enemy. Their captives become their benefactors and protectors. Although this is the slowest to impose, it is often quite long-lasting, as the captives do not see any military force arrayed against them. Their religion is left more or less intact. They have freedom to speak and to travel, and they participate in elections for their rulers. Without realizing it, they are conquered, and the instruments of their own society are used to transfer their wealth to their captives and make the conquest complete. Now, in 1900, the average American worker paid few taxes and had little debt. Last year, payments on debts and taxes took more than half of what he earned. Is it possible a form of conquest has been imposed on our people? Listen on and decide for yourself. And may God have mercy on this once debt-free and great nation in Christ. Now, money control over America. Americans living in what is called the richest nation on earth seem always to be short of money. Wives are working in unprecedented numbers. Husbands hope for overtime hours to earn money, or take part-time jobs in the evenings and weekends. Children look for odd jobs for spending money. The family debt climbs higher, and psychologists say one of the biggest causes of family quarrels and breakups is arguments over money. Much of this trouble can be traced to our present debt money system. Too few Americans realize why Christian statesmen wrote into Article 1 of the United States Constitution that Congress shall have the power to coin money and regulate the value thereof. Now, money is man's creation. Economists use the term create when speaking of the process by which money comes into existence. Now, creation means making something that did not exist before. Lumbermen make boards from trees, workers build houses from lumber, and factories manufacture automobiles from metal, glass, and other materials. But in all these, they did not create. They only changed existing materials into a more usable and therefore more valuable form. Now, this is not so with money. Here and here alone, man actually creates something out of nothing. A piece of paper is of little value is printed so that it is worth a piece of lumber. With different figures, it can buy the automobile or even the house. Its value has been created in the true meaning of the word. Now, money creating is very profitable. As you well know, money is very cheap to make, and whoever does the creating of money in a nation can make a tremendous profit. Builders work hard to make a profit of 5% above their costs to build a house. Automakers sell their cars for 1% to 2% above the cost to manufacture, and it is considered good business, but money manufacturers have no limit on their profits. Since a few cents will print a $1 bill or a $10,000 bill, that profit is part of their system. But first, let us consider another unique characteristic of the thing money, the love of which is the root of all evil. Okay, now, once again, money creating is very profitable. An adequate money supply is needed in any society. An adequate supply of money is indispensable to civilized society. We could forgo many other things, but without money, industry would grind to a halt. Farms would become only self-sustaining units. Surplus food would disappear. Jobs requiring work of more than one man or one family would remain undone. Shipping and large movements of goods would cease. Hungry people would plunder and kill to remain alive, and all government except family or tribe would cease to function. An overstatement, you say? Not at all. Money is the blood of civilized society, the means of all commercial trade, except simple barter. It is the measure and instrument by which one product is sold and another purchased. Remove money or even reduce the supply below that which is necessary to carry on current levels of trade, and the results are catastrophic. For example, we need only look at America's depression of the early 1930s. Or should I say the bankers' depression of the 1930s. In 1930, America did not lack in industrial capacity, fertile farmland, skilled and willing workers, or in industrious farm families. It had an extensive and highly efficient transportation system and railroads, road networks, and inland and ocean waterways. Communications between regions and localities were the best in the world, utilizing telephone, teletype, radio, and a well-operated government mail system. No war had ravaged the cities or the countryside. No pestilence weakened the population, nor had famine stalked the land. The United States of America in 1930 lacked only one thing, an adequate supply of money to carry on trade and commerce. In the early 1930s, bankers, the only source of new money and credit, deliberately refused loans to industries, stores, and farms. Payments on existing loans were required, however, and money rapidly disappeared from circulation. Goods were available to be purchased, jobs waiting to be done, but the lack of money brought the nation to a standstill. By this simple ploy, America was put in the Depression, and the greedy bankers took possession of hundreds of thousands of farms, homes, and business properties. The people were told, times are hard and money is short. Not understanding the system, they were cruelly robbed of their earnings, their savings, and their property. Money for peace, no, but they had money for war. World War II ended the Depression. The same bankers who in the early 30s had no loans for peacetime houses, food, and clothing, suddenly had unlimited billions to lend for army barracks, K-rations, and uniforms. A nation that in 1934 couldn't produce food for sale suddenly could produce bombs to send free to Germany and Japan. With the sudden increase in money, people were hired. Farms sold their produce. Factories went to 2 shifts. Mines reopened, and the Great Depression was over. Now, some politicians were blamed for it, and others took credit for ending it. The truth is, the lack of money caused by the bankers brought on the Depression. Inadequate money ended it. The people were never told the simple truth that in this video, I will endeavor to show how these same bankers who control our money and credit have used their control to plunder America and place us in bondage. Power to coin and regulate money. When we can see the disastrous results of an artificially created shortage of money, we can better understand why our founding fathers, who understood both money and God's laws, insisted on placing the money, the power to create money, that is, and the power to control it only in the hands of the federal Congress. They believed that all citizens should share in the profits of its creation, and therefore the national government must be the only creator of money. They further believed that all citizens of whatever state or territory or station in life would benefit by an adequate and stable supply, and therefore the national government must also be by law the only controller of the value of money. Since the federal Congress was the only legislative body subject to all the citizens at the ballot box, it was to their minds the only safe depository of so much profit and so much power. They wrote it out in the simple but all-inclusive, Congress shall have the power to coin money and regulate the value thereof. Now, how people lost control to the Federal Reserve Bank. Now, this is very important to hear. Please hear this. How we lost control to these bankers. And if you don't mind, let me take a little sip of tea, and I promise you that's all it is, just a little tea. I make my own tea, and it is good. I really believe it's better than that which is marketed commercially in the stores where we buy it. But anyway, folks, you got to get cooled down a little bit. Sometimes the voice dries out, so let me take another little swig. Just that little bit of sugar high helps. Now, how we lost control to the Federal Reserve. Instead of the constitutional method of creating our money and putting it into circulation, we now have an entirely unconstitutional system that has resulted in almost disastrous conditions, as we shall see. Since our money was handled both legally and illegally before 1913, we shall consider only the years following 1913. Since from that year on, all of our money has been created and issued by an illegal method that will eventually destroy the United States if it is not changed. Prior to 1913, America was a prosperous, powerful, and growing nation, and we were at peace with our neighbors and the envy of the world. But in December of 1913, Congress, with many members away for the Christmas holidays, passed what has since been known as the Federal Reserve Act, omitting the burdensome details. It simply authorized the establishment of a Federal Reserve Corporation with a board of directors, the Federal Reserve Board to run it, and the United States was divided into 12 Federal Reserve districts. This simple but terrible law completely removed from Congress the right to create money or to have any control over its creation, and gave that function to the Federal Reserve Corporation. This was done with appropriate fanfare and propaganda that this would remove money from politics. They didn't say, and therefore from the people's control. They didn't tell you that part. There's parts sometimes whenever our government wants to pass law into being, they only give us piecemeal truths as to what's going to be the outcome. They didn't tell you that it would prevent boom and bust from hurting our citizens. The people were not told then, and most still do not know today, that the Federal Reserve Corporation is a private-owned corporation controlled by bankers and therefore is operated for the financial gain of the bankers over the people rather than for the good of the people. The word federal was used only to deceive the people, and it was more disastrous than Pearl Harbor. Since that day of infamy, more disastrous to us than Pearl Harbor was. The small group of privileged people who lend us our money have accrued to themselves all of the profits of printing our money and more. Since 1913, they have created tens of billions of dollars in money and credit, which is their own personal property. Then they lend to our government and our people at interest. The rich get richer and the poor get poorer, and become the secret policy. It had become the secret policy of our national government, an example of the process of creation, and its conversion to people's debt will aid our understanding. They print it, we borrow it, and pay them interest. We shall start with the need for money. The federal government, having spent more than it has taken from its citizens in taxes, needs, for the sake of illustration, $1 billion, let's say. Since it does not have the money and Congress has given away its authority to create it, the government must go to the creators for the $1 billion. But the Federal Reserve, a private corporation, doesn't just give its money away. The bankers are willing to deliver $1 billion in money or credit to the federal government in exchange for the government's agreement to pay it back with interest. So Congress authorizes the Treasury Department to print $1 billion in U.S. bonds, which are then delivered to the Federal Reserve bankers. Now, the Federal Reserve then pays the cost of printing the $1 billion, about $1,000, and makes the exchange. The government then uses the money to pay its obligations. Now, what are the results of this fantastic transaction? Well, $1 billion in government bills are paid all right, but the government has now indebted the people to the bankers for $1 billion, on which the people must pay interest. Tens of thousands of such transactions have taken place since 1913, so that by the 1980s and up to 2011, the U.S. government is indebted to the bankers for over $14 trillion, on which the people pay over $412 billion a year in interest alone, with no hope of ever paying off the principal. Now, supposedly, our children and following generations will pay forever and forever. And as the making of this video, our national debt is over $14 trillion. This video is being made in 2011. And there's more. You say, well, this is pretty bad, but yet it is. Yes, it is, but we have shown only part of the sordid story. Under this unholy system, those United States bonds have now become assets of the bankers, which gives them privileges far beyond what they had before. It goes into the Federal Reserve System, which they use as reserves to create more credit to lend. Now, current reserve requirements allow them to use that $1 billion in bonds to create as much as $15 billion in new credit to lend to states, municipalities, individuals, and businesses. Added to the original $1 billion, they could add $16 billion of created credit out in loans, paying them interest, with their only cost being $1,000 for printing the original $1 billion. Since the U.S. Congress has not issued constitutional money since 1863, over 100 years, in order for the people to have money to carry on trade and commerce, they are forced to borrow the created credit of the monopoly bankers and pay them usury interest. We have to borrow from the bankers. And there's still more. There's still more. It overwhelms me just presenting it. It overwhelms me. In addition to the vast wealth drawn to them through this almost unlimited usury, the bankers who control the money at the top are able to approve or disapprove large loans to large and successful corporations, to the extent that refusal of a loan will bring about a reduction in the price that that corporation's stock sells for on the market. Now, please hear this. After depressing the price, the bankers' agents buy large blocks of the stock, after which the sometimes multi-million-dollar loan is approved. The stock rises and is then sold for a profit. In this manner, billions of dollars are made with which to buy stock. This practice is so refined today that the Federal Reserve Board need only announce to the newspapers an increase or decrease in their rediscount rate to send stocks up and down as they wish. Now, using this method since 1913, the bankers and their agents have purchased secret or open control of almost every large corporation in America. Using that control, they then force the corporations to borrow huge sums from their banks, so that corporations' earnings are siphoned off in the form of interest to the banks. This leaves little as actual profits which can be paid as dividends, and explains why stock prices are so depressed, while the banks reap billions in interest from corporate loans. In effect, the bankers get almost all of the profits, while individual stockholders are left holding the bags. The millions of working families of America are now indebted to the few thousand banking families for twice the assessed value of the entire United States. And these banking families obtain that debt against us for the cost of paper, ink, and bookkeeping. The interest amount is never created. Now, this is the real clincher. The only way new money, which is not true money but is credit representing a debt, goes into circulation in America is when it is borrowed from bankers. Now, when the state and people borrow large sums, we seem to prosper. However, the bankers create only the amount of the principal of each loan, never the extra amount needed to pay the interest. Therefore, the new money never equals the new debt added. The amount needed to pay the interest on loans is not created, and therefore does not exist. Under this kind of a system, where new debt always exceeds the new money, no matter how much or how little is borrowed, the total debt increasingly outstrips the amount of money available to pay the debt. The people can never get out of debt. Now, let me see if I can break it down a little bit more simpler here for you to understand. In other words, if there were only two people on planet Earth, and you had to come to me for money, okay, and each one of you borrowed $600, let's say, from me, and each one of you had to pay me $630 back. Well, if all I put out there in circulation was $600 to you and $600 to the other fella, and it came time for you to pay me back, where are you going to get the $30 interest? Each one of you, because all there is out there is what we've put $1,200 out there in the circulation. Where's the other $60 going to come from? Well, it's not going to come from anywhere, because if all you could pay me back is the $1,200, which that I have coming according to the covenant agreement you agreed with me when you signed the loan the stipulations of the loan. But I lent you that money, but I failed to put out there the extra money into the society that's going to be the interest to pay me back. That means inevitably one or both of you are going to actually have to default. And I'm going to be able to come in and confiscate everything that you worked hard for to build with that very money that you borrowed from me. So let's look at it a little further. Now, $60,000 is borrowed to build a home. Guess how much you have to pay back? You have to pay back $255,931.20. That means that you're going to have to buy the banking people 4 homes for the 1 home that you're borrowing money from. Now, when a citizen goes to a banker to borrow $60,000 to purchase a home or a farm, the bank clerk has the borrower agree to pay back the loan plus interest. At 14% interest for 30 years, the borrower must agree to pay $710.92 per month for a total of $255,931.20. Excuse me. Now, the clerk then requires the citizen to assign to the banker the right of ownership of the property if the borrower does not make the required payments. Now, the bank clerk gives the borrower a $60,000 check or a $60,000 deposit slip, crediting the borrower's checking account with $60,000. The borrower then writes checks to the builder, subcontractors, etc., who in turn write checks. $60,000 of new checkbook money is thereby added to money in circulation. However, and this is the fatal flaw in the usury system, the only new money created and put into circulation is the amount of the loan, $60,000. The money to pay the interest is not created, and therefore was not added to the money in circulation, as I gave you that example a while ago. Even so, this borrower and those who follow him in ownership of the property must earn and take out of circulation $255,931.20, almost $200,000 more than what he put into circulation when he borrowed the original $60,000. And by the way, it is this interest which cheats all families out of nicer homes. It is not that they can't afford them. It is because the banker's usury forces them to pay for 4 homes to get 1. Now, every new loan puts the same process into operation. Each borrower adds a small sum to the total money supply when he borrows. But the payments on the loan, because of the interest, then deduct a much larger sum from the total money supply. Now, there is therefore no way all debtors can pay off the money lenders. As they pay the principal, therefore no way all debtors can pay off the money lender. Well, as they pay off the principal and interest, the money in circulation disappears, and they're not going to be able to pay back all the debtors. And all they can do is struggle against each other, borrowing more and more money from the money lenders each generation. The money lender bankers who produce nothing of value slowly, then more rapidly gain a death grip on the land building and the present and future earnings of the whole working population. You know, Proverbs 22:7 says it has actually come to pass in America. It says the borrowers have become servants unto the lenders. No wonder God Almighty forbids interest on loans. You know, it really took many years for me to understand. And of course, I had to read and understand and look at videos and all this, just really how this worked. But when you think about it, the easiest description that I could come up with to explain to other people is what I gave you just a while ago. If there was only 2 people on planet Earth, and if I lent you both $600 but told you you each had to pay me back $630, Well, if all I, the banker, put out there into existence, if all I printed was $1,200, and I didn't print beyond that to put it in circulation, that means you could pay me back the $600 maybe, but you're not going to be able to pay me back the interest because that money does not exist out there. If both of you bring me back $600 a month later and say, here it is, I'll say, wait a minute. You owe me $30 interest and you do too, and according to our agreement, if you don't pay it, I'm going to be able to foreclose and take everything you worked hard for. You might say, well, there's not that out there in existence. I mean, this is all the money there is. You lent us this, but there's the interest money you didn't put out there into existence for us to have a chance to make it and bring you back the interest. And the banker's thinking, oh, dupe to stoop, you finally figured this out. Oh, I'm going to have to come up with something here. I hate it that you figured this out, because that really shows me to be the villain that I am, the low-life thief that I am. And my friend, the bankers have refined this, this system, this sinister system of lending. And they know what they're doing, and they've been doing it since 1913. Now, small loans do the same thing. If you haven't quite grasped the impact of what has already been mentioned here, let us consider a small auto loan for 3 years at 18%. The citizen borrows $5,000 and pays it into circulation. And he goes to the dealer, factory, miner, etc., and signs a note agreeing to pay the banker $6,500 back. Now, the citizen has to pay $180 per month of his earnings to the banker. In 3 years, he will take out of circulation. He'll take out of circulation $1,500 more than he put into circulation. Now, every loan of banker-created money, credit, causes the same thing to happen. Since, as I mentioned before, when you borrow money, you put a certain amount out there, but they fail to lend you the interest to put out there with it. And this has happened millions of times since 1913 and continues today. And you can see why America has gone from a prosperous, debt-free nation to a debt-ridden nation, where practically every home, farm, and business is paying usury tribute to some banker. The usury tribute to the bankers on personal, local, state, and federal debt totals more than the combined earned of 25% of the working people. Soon it will be 50% and continue upward. Now, this is why bankers prosper in good times or bad. And the millions of transactions made each year, like those mentioned, little actual currency changes hands, nor is it necessary that it do so. 95% of all cash transactions in the U.S. are by check, so the banker is perfectly safe in creating that so-called loan by writing the check or deposit slip, not against actual money, but against your promise to pay it back. The cost to him is paper and ink and a few dollars in salaries and office costs for each transaction. It is check kiting on an enormous scale. The profits increase rapidly year after year. The cost to you, eventually everything. In 1910, the U.S. federal debt was only $1 billion, or $12.40 per citizen. State and local debts were practically non-existent. By 1920, after only 6 years of Federal Reserve shenanigans, the federal debt had jumped to $24 billion, or $228 per person, and state and local debts were mushrooming. But by 1981, the federal debt passed $1 trillion and was growing exponentially, and bankers tripled the interest rates. State and local debts are more now than the value of all land and buildings in America. And as of this year of 2011, our national debt per U.S. citizen is $35,446. And since September the 28th, 2007, our national debt increases on the average of $3.55 billion a year. Now, if we signed over to the moneylenders all of America, we would still owe them 2 more Americas plus their usury, of course. And however, they are too cunning to take title to everything. They will instead leave you with some illusion of ownership so that you and your children will continually to work and pay the bankers more of your earnings on ever-increasing debts. The establishment has captured our people with their ungodly system of usury and debt, as certainly as if they had marched in with a uniformed army. To understand that it really is a conquest, go back and view the three types of conquest at the beginning of this video. The borrower must pay back more than he borrowed. So bankers always get more than they lend. Well, folks, it's almost an hour. I'm going to bring this to a close, and hopefully I'll finish it up in another video. And I don't think the next video is going to be this long. And I hope that you are enjoying this, and that you will, by way and means of this video, come to a better understanding of the sinister system that the United States has been sold out to.